Okay, this special meeting of the Carefree Town Council will come to order. This is a workshop meeting. Councilman Johnson is out of town and the Vice Mayor will join us shortly. And please take a silent roll call. And item number 1 is the budget work session, FY26 program-based budget. Mr. Neese.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Today will be the shortest of the 3 workshops. I'll go over some quick hits on the budget and then open it up for questions. So third and final workshop today. Next month we'll begin the approval process for the budget. At this workshop I'll give a general overview of the general fund and capital projects, tie both those together to give you an overall summary of the budget, touch upon the high notes of the program-based budget, and then open it up to questions. As we have discussed at the previous 2 workshops, pursuant to the council-approved strategic plan, the budget continues to prioritize public safety, continues investments in the community's aging infrastructure, ensures quality development by doing a comprehensive examination of our zoning standards, as well as seeks collaboration within the community through our different digital communication platforms. So let's start putting numbers to this overall program. The general fund is our annual operation fund. That's similar to any municipality within the state and throughout the nation. We anticipate approximately $8.5 million coming in to our general fund this coming fiscal year, and approximately $7.7 million in expenses, or a minimum surplus of $700,000. And I say minimum because we're forecasting, and we use a 5-year average here when we look at our local sales tax. That 5-year average is $5.32 million. If you look at our annual sales tax from last fiscal year, we're about $6.3 million, $6.4 million. So we're $1 million under. That provides us a buffer. That buffer could be an additional in surplus if we perform at the same levels of last year, or if not better, that will add to that surplus of over $1 million. In addition, we don't include any earned interest. I consider that speculative. To benchmark that, last year we collected about $500,000 off of our investments. Next year, maybe more, maybe less, maybe the same thing. I don't know. But that is not included in that surplus. Add that to the potential surplus, and we're over $2 million in the black. So the town is performing well. We're very conservative when we look at our local sales tax and forecasting that local sales tax using that 5-year average. The state gives us the figures for the state shared revenue, also known as intergovernmental funds. We're projecting a total of about $1.75 million in state shared revenue. And cost recovery is the funds that we collect off of services provided by town staff who's sitting behind me. So essentially, permits and licenses are a big part of that. So it's fees to reimburse for the time and the compensation associated with staff. So about $8.5 million in total revenue. As far as the expense side of the ledger, the largest expense typically and in association with the strategic plan is public safety, about $2.9 million. Leading the way is our contract with Rural Metro, which is up in approximately 2 years. We'll begin those negotiations with the new leadership team over in Rural Metro to look at the terms and conditions for a new contract with them. So that's something that we'll focus on over this next fiscal year. Operations and salary and benefits for the town employees, each about $2.2 million. And then risk management, legal fees and insurance, about $440,000. As far as our capital investments, this is the capital investment dashboard that I put together each year. Left side of the slide is the overall investments. Right side is the funding source. You can see the 3 independent areas where we're looking to invest: public work facilities, street maintenance, and town center improvements. Beginning with town center improvements, the implementation of the comprehensive Signage plan, next month at our May agenda, we'll have a contract. We went through a request for proposal process, and we did receive a bid within that budgeted line item. Most likely the cost will be within the next fiscal year, so we're budgeting for those costs. EV Phase 2 grant is speculative. Whether we receive that or not remains to be seen, but we have to have a placeholder within the budget for that. Parking and sidewalk improvements, continuity of sidewalks, fixing some sidewalks, and looking at parking capacity and improvements to help the downtown business core will be a focus and be discussed in more detail at the May 12th joint session between planning and zoning and town council. So about $1.8 million in the town center, our economic engine. Street maintenance, we have talked about this at the previous 2 budget workshops. Once again, we aim high. This is a ceiling based upon what we received as far as the bidding process for our last mill and overlay. So we take the highest bid and use that to forecast the potential costs associated with a mill and overlay in these 2 neighborhoods. Those 2 neighborhoods align with the strategic plan that the council approved, as well as the updated CIP. Once again, we're trying to replace 50 to 60-year-old asphalt. We have programmed over the years and have done our job. Typically asphalt lasts 25 to 40 years. Once again, this is 50 to 60-year-old asphalt that has structural integrity problems that we're trying to address. Public works facilities, most notably, are the drainage projects. We do receive severe damage during our monsoon season, so we're trying to program and repair some of those drainage culverts that go underneath our streets to protect the integrity of the streets. We also program for faded street signs and replacement of signs, and we're looking at about $50,000 there. And then the placeholder for our traffic calming program, which is a program that the council adopted many years ago, and it's a partnership with our local neighborhoods. If they seek some type of traffic calming technique within their neighborhood, they have a little skin in the game. The town cooperates and works with them on programming that and collaborating with the neighborhood to address their safety concerns. As far as the funding source, these are the respective categories. Obviously, the category at the top is the EV grant. If we receive that, the funding will come in on this line. The next 2 lines are HERF and UTCAP. HERF is the funds that we received that are only allocated to street maintenance projects. That's the 18-cent highway user revenue fund, the gas tax that people pay throughout the state. And then UTCAP is a fee that Southwest Gas pays us incrementally. We save up and then we spend down that account. So we'll use the funds in that account to apply against the proposed street maintenance project. The general fund contribution is the savings. And once again, that savings could be a minimum of $700,000, the surplus, or up to $2 million. We don't know. It depends on the performance of sales tax and obviously our speculative interest. But we know that we will have a surplus and that will be applied towards those capital investments. And based upon the performance of our general fund, the amount that we take out of our savings account, 3.2 is the maximum, but it most likely will be significantly less based upon the surplus. So speak of surplus, our capital reserves are at an all-time high. We continue to invest in our aging infrastructure, maintaining the assets that people within every neighborhood in Carefree appreciate and see on a daily basis. I said this before, I'll say this again, the fiscal health and the physical health of this community has never been better. We are in great hands right now, and you as leaders of this community should be pretty proud of the position that we're in. You combine our general fund and our capital expenses, and this slide incorporates the overall expenses, approximately $12.5 million. Once again, about 2/3 of that spend is within public safety and investments in our aging infrastructure. You look at the right hand side of this slide, the table here, and from a salaries and benefits and risk management perspective, when you compare it to the other operation, public safety and capital expenses, they are going up, but not going up as quickly as the other expenses. So nominal increases in both compensation and risk management, and we analyzed the value of each and every position last year, much like a home appraisal. How do you assign a value to your respective home? You go through a home appraisal. We did a individual appraisal of every position within the town. And there's a lot of variables with a home appraisal and the size of a home and the various features of a home. Just like a position with a community or any company, there are different attributes with that. So you look at the roles and responsibilities. You look at the certifications. You look at the education. You look at the years of that position. That's what that compensation study did. It did an appraisal of each one of these positions and then compared it to the local market. That study is online and also attached to this program-based budget. So it gives a value to that. When you look at the size of our staff, you look at the value proposition, we are getting a bang for the buck with what we're doing here. Adding about $1.5 million in grants, which we went through in our last budget workshop, and a $500,000 contingency, our total expenditures are about $14.5 million. There are statutory exclusions to this total expenditure that adds up to about $2.465 million. So this is the total expenditures subject to our expenditure limit of $13.2 million. That's set by state statute. We are about $1.2 million under that statutory expenditure limit. The council has been given a copy of the program-based budget, and I don't know many communities that don't do something like this. This marries the narrative that every community has. How are the funds received? Where does it come from? How is it expensed? It tells you about the operation and management of the town. This is a critical document that every community produces. And the GFOA, the governmental finance officials, they have a standard, and this follows that standard. So the program-based budget speaks of the financial controls the town has in place. Very important. If you ever question what controls we have in place, read this. It details it. It explains in depth the town revenues. Where does it come from? How do we fund the town? It outlines the funds invested within our community and the business models that we have assigned with these expenses. We just don't look at this in isolation. Good example is the consolidated court, the model that I created through that intergovernmental agreement that's used throughout the state now with smaller communities. We look and we conservatively manage this community. And then it outlines the statutory expenditure limit, something that's important that I just went over. So, Mayor, members of council, that concludes the brief overview that I have. Once again, I said it's going to be quick compared to the last two workshops. But based on what we've shared, you can see that if you compare our budget, and every other community is talking about this, other governmental entities are talking about their budget this time of year, you can see how our budget, Carefree's budget, is appropriately scaled to the size of our community. And we get the best return for the investment in our residents. So at this point in time, Mayor, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
So could you go over it again?
Yeah, you can watch the video.
Okay, nice job. And so at this stage, we'll open up to questions from council. Looks like you have some questions.
I have some questions.
Go right ahead.
So when you were talking about how our 130 pages looks like other towns, I did go on and read the budgets for many towns our size. And no, it doesn't. And I brought for you several sheets showing it how they break down numbers. So to give you some, the town of Taylor, 9 pages, their population is 4,475. Their budget's 22.362 million. Town of Clifton is 12 pages. They have a $10 million budget, 3,788 population. Pine Top Lakeside, population 4245. They have a 23.434 budget, 12 pages. Benson, 12 pages. They have a $35 million budget. They're 5,500 people. Bisbee has a $181 million budget. They're 5,000 people. They were the only one that was 111 pages, and it was pretty much all numbers. So, you know, it's a nice novel, but I don't think it's appropriate for a town our size. I don't know how many hours were spent putting it together. The other thing is I looked into your analysis of the salaries that you did. It was not based on, as you said to me last, oranges to oranges. The towns in that are Cave Creek, 5,200, they have 57 million in a budget. El Mirage has 37,000 people, 39 million. Fountain Hills has 23,000. Litchfield is 65 million. So these budgets are all in excess of $50 million. And most of their salaries were equal or below ours. So to use the towns I just named that are more in keeping with population size and budget size would have been a more realistic salary comparison. And I know you all say that it's because we're in the Scottsdale market. A lot of people prefer to work in a small town. I was in the New York City market and did not pay New York City prices. So that was 2 things that stood out.
Well, we took the compensation consultants who have done hundreds of entities in the state of Arizona for years, as well as probably 10 or 15 other states. So it was a third-party independent analysis where job classification as well as compensation are their specializations. So what you're telling me is that they don't know how to do their job?
I didn't say that. I said they did not do orange to orange comparison.
Well, no,
I'm
you're
not-
you're
but
saying that
You're saying you should be comparing, instead of comparing us to towns with similar populations.
population is
Similar-
one metric.
But also
One metric.
budgets are another
One at a
metric,
Okay.
Sheila. Budgets are another metric. These budgets are even higher than ours with similar populations. So that's a fairer comparison. You have to look at the towns, the population, the square land, and the budget.
So you're
we're
saying
the smallest town in it.
So you're saying that the compensation consultants don't know how to do what their professional area of expertise is?
No, I'm saying that if you hire a consultant and tell them you want a certain outcome, you usually get it.
Okay,
Well,
so
you know,
you're-
that's really quite an accusation. So now you're calling us corrupt?
No, I'm not at all. I'm just saying, why didn't we compare like to like?
we compared based
So
on the
why
professionals.
limit ourselves to Arizona? Why don't we go to
Because
Appalachia?
we're in Arizona.
Well,
we're
we're in
in
Maricopa
Arizona.
County.
We are in Maricopa County. We're also have a lot of towns similar to us. So I'm saying a fairer, maybe they're right, but when you go online and compare all these towns who have similar number of employees, there's a lot of similarities. It would be normal to say like to like. I'm not saying they're corrupt, I'm just saying
Well,
they
but you're saying that they
focus
don't know how to do their
narrowly
job.
on Maricopa.
You're saying that they're not doing the job that their area of expertise
So,
is.
I would like to clarify, what are the benchmark communities that you think would be valid in a comparison?
The ones I
And,
named.
and from a market perspective, because we're talking about value and assigning value, from a market
Yes.
perspective, what is a home value there versus a home value here in Carefree? Carefree's home value is 1.25. If I go to a rural area, I will guarantee you the home value is not 1.25. So when you're assigning value to anybody, whether it's a public sector worker or a private sector worker, they're going to look at the local attributes of like positions and then what the market is for that area, that niche in the market. When you go to a rural area, it's not like for like. So what you're making a comparison to is not something that's similar. The Phoenix metropolitan area, the cost of living here, and this was articulated when this was presented by the third party, the individual that we hired to give it. And the guy has some professional integrity. He's not going to jeopardize his professional integrity over Carefree. I mean, this is what he does for a living. Little old Carefree is not going to make it or break it. He's given you his professional credentials and how you evaluate value when it comes to people. And it's much like value when you're making an assessment on a home. You can't compare a rural area to a urbanized area. The cost of living here, and this is basic. I mean, the cost of living in the Phoenix metropolitan area is a hell of a lot more than Pine Top.
Well, we hired a third-party independent firm with a specialization in job classification and compensation studies. And if you would like us to hire another
No, I'm not saying you
firm.
should.
Okay, well, so this is their area of expertise. This is what they do. And they've done hundreds of studies across Arizona for different entities.
We have to wait.
I'm sorry.
No, we have public.
Oh, so to me, this question has been asked and answered. We hired a well-seasoned professional group with experience ranging from 10 to 30 years in this area of job classification and compensation. And their whole entire purpose is to analyze. I mean, you could ask all of the staff, they sat down with them to make sure that they understood the job classification so they could do an apples to apples comparison. And then the compensation, I think a big part of it, the very first thing is, are you in, the Phoenix MSA? And we have to deal with the reality of being in a much higher cost area than, say, Pine Top Lakeside. That's just the reality of it, and I don't think we'll attract people from Pine Top Lakeside.
I would just go back to the comments from MCSO. So MCSO has a retention problem and they have a recruiting problem. And they say that the reason they have that problem is because they don't pay them enough. And so they don't pay, maybe they're paying Taylor wages to MCSO, and that's why they have this problem. But they're not paying Maricopa wages. And that's why they're losing people. They're losing officers to other law enforcement districts within the county. And I would, personally, if I was an officer, I think I'd rather work at an MCSO for many of the reasons that many of us would find working in a small town to be attractive. It's more of a rural environment, right? You're not in a big city necessarily combating big city problems. You're driving around in open spaces. It's attractive. It's pretty. You're dealing with a different group of people, but they still have to pay the prevailing wage, or they can't recruit and they can't retain. And that's the dilemma that we would have if we failed to do so.
And I did have to set compensation for 35 professionals every year, and we had to use relevant metrics to make that decision. And so when I saw this study, it was relevant metrics to make the decisions and analysis for our population of staff. I mean, to me, this has been asked and answered. We have done the work, we hired a professional, they're a well-known, respected firm, they have experience with job classification and compensation, that's what they do. And I don't know why we continue to discuss this.
I just would like to add, on top of Sheila, we've done all the background, we've done all the research on this, but we have the best staff around. And when you look at these people individually and the jobs that they do, I think that you're making it seem like they aren't doing their jobs and that they're way overpaid.
I did not say
And they
that.
are not way overpaid, and they do a great job for us, and I thank you all.
I would like to add, when we talk about like for like, the services that we provide for permits and so on is more like Paradise Valley. The mountainside ordinance that we have is like their hillside ordinance. The effort that we have to go through in reviewing the plans and approving everything is equally involved as Paradise Valley. And if we look at the compensation for Paradise Valley, I'm sure that we're right there. So I agree. We have a great team.
I mean, we took the appropriate action when this question came up. It was asked, we answered it, and we had the right people in the right place to do the job, and this should be the end of the conversation.
It's
Okay.
on the record, anyway. I would have liked to see more like by like. I also would like to see done more of a budget where you have numbers, not a narrative, not a novel. And all these towns produce that, including one that has 181 million, the city of Bisbee. If you look at theirs, it's every line item for, and
Do
every
they
employee.
have utilities associated with that? Is that those enterprise funds?
No, but I'm saying, yeah, but in there.
That explains it.
Well,
Yeah, but
wait,
they're-
one thing I would-
No, I'm talking about the layout of their budget.
You're looking
I'm
at
not-
Schedule A through G, which we'll be producing. And that's something I stated last time, is that Schedule A through G is a series of spreadsheets. Those will be produced as well, too. If you look at the back of this document, it has an appendix, and that appendix speaks
I
of
understand.
Schedule A through G.
But they don't do this.
So,
You know, they don't do, we're 8.8 square miles. We're a small town.
okay, I just want to say one thing to that. I understand what you're saying, Councilman Roth, and would I like to read something that's 10 pages, over 100 pages? I would. However, I would say the figures are there, and when you read through it, it does take a while. It explains a lot of things. So I think that people maybe that are not as familiar, if you just gave them the numbers, it would be difficult for them. And so by having this kind of setup, they can go through and read it, understand it, and go from there. I don't think you can do that if it's just numbers. And so that would be my only
How
comment to that.
many residents do you think read this? in
Well, for
reality?
anybody that wants to truly understand the budget, and we have questions year-round at, or, you know, call to the public where people stand up and say something about the budget or how much money we spend. This, once again, this budget answers those questions. And so this year, the budget grew because we explained more, because there were more questions. So let's be even more transparent and make sure we explain as much as we possibly can. And so I do a 2-pager once we pass our budget that I hand out at the post office to make it simple for people to understand how we raise revenue and how we spend our money, but it certainly doesn't go into detail. I mean, it's pretty basic, and when I get that, I'll send it out to everyone so they can have a 2-pager.
Yeah, I would say a key word that you use is transparency, so it helps explain what we're doing. So when Mayor Schwan was here, we had this numbers, double-sided pages with numbers. It was impossible, virtually impossible. to understand what it was. I struggled with it, and I'm a reasonably smart guy. And I think just putting out to the public a ledger, a spreadsheet, is, it would actually turn them off from, and I agree with you, not too many people read this, but if we distribute just spreadsheets, even fewer people would read them. And here, we have a table of contents, they can pick and choose what interests them, and just cut to the chase without plowing through the rest of it. But if they do take the time, they'll understand how the town works better than they probably do before they started reading it. So I think it's actually a service to the public to provide such a document, rather than just a series of spreadsheets. That's my opinion.
Most
I agree.
people I talk to don't. They're
Okay.
overwhelmed by it, they can't understand it, and they're not clear on the numbers.
Well-
But beside that point, I wanted to go on page
Well-
25,
okay.
Gary, you talk about alternative financing, that spreading projects for multiple future generations. I mean, I don't see why we already have the water tank not being paid off to 2052. So are we gonna add road projects not being paid off to 2052 also?
No, Mayor, members of the council, that's just an explanation of options. And certainly, the cash reserve that we have dedicated to our capital projects is something that has been built up during my tenure here to pay for those respective projects. But I don't know what a future council will decide to do. And obviously, one of those options is to do it that way. That's just a nod to that respective approach. Does that mean that that's the way we're doing it? No. I have a proven track record of trying to pay cash to maintain the town's assets.
Yeah, which I would prefer. You also, on page 26, you talk about you should have the flexibility to transfer money between departments. We've gone through the budget department. Each area has given us their budget. If they're working within that, why would we be transferring money? Because then it's saying, are you gonna come to us and say, roadworks, it needs 200,000 and we're gonna take it out in planning and zoning? I mean, how would that work?
No, Mayor, members of council, obviously, if there's something like that, that would be a council decision that we would bring back to the council. We have always been very transparent with how things are funded, and you see on a monthly basis where the funds are coming from. The end of the day, these, what is being referred to are the long-standing policies of the town. So guiding financial policies of the town. This is what we're explaining in this section, is the controls that we have in place. Ultimately, if the council wants to change those policies, that can be done. So for example, rainy day fund, we've allocated $2.5 million. Should that be more in the future? That's something that the council should consider and discuss in the future. Is $2.5 million sufficient as a rainy day fund? So that's a policy decision that can be updated. This is the one-stop shop so that people can see what are the financial controls of the town and explain to them some of the options and things to consider.
Also on legal fees, shouldn't all, on page 49, you talk about the town contracting additional services for the general legal fee, and within different departments, shouldn't all legal services be on one line? And also, shouldn't all consulting and professional services, there's no separation, like there's no what we spent for the consultants on the payroll that you just went through, what did we spend on that? We spent the consultants for doing the strategic plan. We should have a line item for all consulting fees, not
I think we do.
put into the different departments, just what are we spending on consulting fees?
Diane, sorry, Councilman Roth. Those things were all approved when the contracts came up with the exact dollar items for them. They're just not listed that way here, but if you can't remember from when they were approved at a previous meeting, you could always go to Gary and just ask him,
No, but-
what was it, and he'll tell you.
People in the town ask, I mean, when you look at other town budgets, I looked at about 30 of them.
Well, just
They
write
do
them down when you get the
No, but I'm
information, and then you
saying
can give it out.
For the public, not for me.
That's what I'm saying, then
Just
you can
have
give
a
it out.
line. Why can't they go and look on our budget and
But-
see it?
So in this fiscal year, I believe we have one consulting budgeted
For
contract thing in here.
Correct.
And is it called out in the budget?
Yes, it's called out under planning and zoning, special
What page is that
projects.
on?
Page,
That's the 170,000.
No, there's two items in there. One, the improvements to the cemetery of 20,000, and then 150,000. So on page 75 of the budget, you can see special projects. We had the GP update in there in years past, and then the upcoming zoning update. We further break out with the notes, special project line consists of $150,000 to conduct a comprehensive update of the zoning ordinance, as well as $20,000 for improvements to the cemetery. Going back to Councilmember Roth's comment about budgeting previous fiscal years for the consultant that did the compensation analysis, that was budgeted under Town Management Division, under special projects as well too. That's where we typically capture these things. It was spelled out that way. In addition, there was something else that was used that you referred to. Same thing. It was within the special projects. When you could go back to the videos last year when we were preparing and budgeting for the updated strategic plan, I spoke about it under the management division of the town, and that we would budget for there, and it fell within that category. And then we expense out of it, and you got to see those expenses on a monthly basis through our check registry. So it's very transparent. We do list those things out. They are exception to the rule. They are not the rule. We don't use consultants that much, just on those unique circumstances.
So other than this one thing here for planning and zoning, are there any other consultants planned for the next fiscal year?
Other than support services under engineering for RFPs and special projects, no, that's it. Yep.
Also on page 80, is this a typo? You have preserved the special planning area at the northeast corner of Tom
That
Darlington.
is a typo, yes.
Cave Creek Road is future resort.
Yes, that is a typo, and the mayor pointed that out to me today, and I just corrected that. So, yes, I am human, yes.
And on page 104, when you're going through all the water, where in here is the repayment on the bond for the water tank?
That is not through the town. That is through the water rates. And so when Greg presents the budget for the water company, you will see the repayment of the bond and the schedule there, and that will be part of his budget. This is the capital aid and advance loan, the loan that was given through town funds to put fire hydrants throughout the town. So you might recall, original part of the system was developed back in the county. The county did not have a ordinance to mandate fire hydrants. So we had large portions of Carefree that did not have fire hydrants. We updated our code when I came on board to ensure that all future subdivisions have fire hydrants. So they were put in by developers. We gave a loan to the water company. When you put in those fire hydrants, you have to recalibrate the system and put in water reservoirs to support that. We put in additional reservoirs. So we increased the capacity of the system. We put in a number of fire hydrants, I think a couple hundred fire hydrants since I have been here to support the residents and the fire suppressant needs of this community. That did not exist. And so part of that liability is captured within our budget to repay the town for those investments. Then we added on $2 million to do that peaceful place upgrade that Greg is currently doing. So that is being done as we speak. And then there's the legacy of the WIFA loan, a low interest rate loan that the municipality qualifies for, but a utility community facility district does not. So when we did that approximately 20 plus years ago, the town applied for it. It reduced the interest rate and thus had a positive impact on rates. Lower interest rates, the ratepayers don't have to buy. So these loans that the town provided help to minimize impacts on rates. So that's what's captured in our budget. The bond is not. That's something that is funded directly through the water company.
But the water company is us.
It's a separate financial entity. So yes, the water company, you sit on the board, but from a financial perspective, it's separate. So this is money that the town gave the water company. This is the repayment schedule. Greg will show in his budget a similar repayment schedule, the exact repayment schedule. He will also show the bonds. Those bonds are not a liability of the town. It's a liability of the water company and the ratepayers. So separate entity financially from the town.
Well, the ratepayers are the residents of the town, am I correct?
They are, but once again, this is a separate financial structure. So it's not the town that is liable, it's the ratepayers that are liable, and not everybody's on the Carefree Water Company. You know, before we didn't have the folks that are on the Cave Creek system. We also have people, or on the Carefree system, we also have people on wells that are not part of the water
Well,
company, so,
A small minority,
yeah. But
Yeah.
they are residents of Carefree.
yeah.
Yeah, the water is a separate legal entity, and the UCFD is a separate
Yeah.
entity.
Yes, so we cannot commingle funds or even have a structure which would allow that to happen.
I would say overall, I did go back to look at the strategic plan and, wanted to see how we tied in to the budget. And, some of the highlights that I think that we have been historically succeeding at is obviously fiscal discipline. Gary's very frugal, and we've had previous frugal town councils, so I think we're, very well positioned and fortunate enough to be able to provide the core services to our citizens as well as maintain our infrastructure. And I know what happens when you don't maintain your infrastructure, and it comes to the point where it becomes unaffordable if you don't do it. And so we are fortunate enough, because we've been so fiscally strong, that we can do that. I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as a very, very, very good thing. And the other thing is that even though the document's over 100 pages for someone who read budgets for a career, I was so impressed when I saw our first program-based budget with how well it's explained. And for anyone that truly wants to understand how we raise revenue and how we spend it, this does the job. So thanks, Gary.
I just have a couple comments and a couple questions. I did have several questions after I read through this. I did reach out to Gary and asked him, so I wouldn't have to do a whole bunch of them here, but, and he did get back to me, which I appreciate that. I would like to find out on rural metro. I know that we're going to be having to acquire a dispatch system and the ambulance system. I know you've got all your conversations and discussions that are going to be going on with them. Is that something where it would be the town's responsibility to acquire those services, or would we be looking at rural metro to acquire those services? I was questioning on that.
So rural metro has still a contractual relationship with the previous parent company. They operate a dispatch system. They would contract with that dispatch system. So they would now have a contract, so additional overhead associated with that contract. They will continue to contract with AMR to do the dispatch for them. Those costs associated with that contract now will be passed off to the town. So that's one of those areas that there wasn't a contract, Now there is a contract, so additional overhead, those costs we will be sharing on when that contract is with us, between us and Rural Metro is renegotiated.
Okay, and actually, I'm kind of glad that they're doing it on their end because I think it will run smoother than if it was something we had to do on our own. So that is a good thing. And then, so I did, and I know nobody really knows 100% on the property tax since we went to the flat tax, and they did for the state income tax sharing, went from 15% to 18% to try and help offset that. Now, I know that there's projections that we could see a 10% drop. And 41% of our budget in that sector is a lot. So a 10% drop is kind of a large number. Now, I did notice, and tell me if I'm wrong, you actually, the number you used is a 10% less number. So you didn't use the actual, you already used that reduction.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe you could help me out here. So I thought the income tax is a 2-year lagger.
It is a 2-year lag.
So we should know the number.
Yes. It's basically comes from the state, so yeah, they have a pretty good understanding of what exactly it will be.
So
'cause it's a
for
2-year.
this next fiscal year, we know the number.
Yes, but it is a 10% drop.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Other questions from the council before we open it up? Okay. So now we'll take public questions. So please, when I call it, fill out a slip if you're interested, and just come on up and limit yourself to 3 minutes, and we'll listen to your questions. So Ms. Maureen Benedetto.
Hi, Mayor and Council, Maureen Benedetto. I just thought it was kind of interesting, the back and forth that was going on. When somebody has a different idea or opinion, sitting in the audience, you almost feel like they're being, I don't know what the word is, but it's hard to listen to sometimes when people have different opinions. You know, transparency is the foundation for truth. And this large budget, I've come to a lot of meetings over the last 5 years, don't miss too many of them, know a lot about what's going on in town. And our budget really looks like the town of Cave Creek. But Cave Creek does something much more transparent than we do. So, for instance, on page 53 of their budget, they have a town manager versus a town administrator. But they list the salary, the overtime, the PTO payment, Medicare retirement, life and medical, telephone, vehicle stipend, state compensation, unemployment. I asked on 2 different public meetings of what everybody's salary was. I don't know why it's such a big secret, and we weren't transparent about it. And it took me having to do this public records request to get it. And it still leaves me with a lot of questions. And, you know, we have 5 cars in our little town. And where do we find the gas maintenance? Where is it spelled out in the budget? Why are we bonusing employees $500? What was that for? You know, those are amounts that seem little, but they can get bigger over time. So I just think we aren't completely transparent. And I think we could do better by really spelling out line item things. And legal, that's another one. We're not transparent about legal at all. And I think this little town is wonderful. I think you guys do a great job. But everybody's not going to think the same way all the time. And we have to do a better job telling us what the line items are. And if you have a company vehicle, tell us how much the maintenance is on it, et cetera. So I think there's still a lot. And I don't want to keep having to do public records request. I pay your salary, everybody's salary. So let's be more transparent about it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you. So this year, for the first time, we actually included salaries in the budget. On the back page, it's there. The other things you asked for are not there, but the salaries are in this document on page, we can dig it up and it's in there.
Mayor Crane,
Yes,
you actually did it as not individually, you did it as the group department. So, you have to be a person that says, it's 2 people that are in administration, whatever the rest of it is.
we will.
Anyway.
So on page 131, we list all the positions in the fiscal year 2024-25 salary, and then the fiscal year 25-26 salary. So each person who works for us is listed there, not by name, but by their title. And so it's all right there. That's a new thing that we've done to let people know, or make them more aware and better understanding of how we're managing that. You have a comment?
Well, I would just say that we are all entitled to our own opinion, but not our own facts. And so I feel that from the compensation study, it has been asked and answered by professionals that had facts to back up their position on job classification and compensation. So I feel very confident that they have done the job that we asked them to do, and it's been asked and answered.
Gary, she also asked about more like of a breakdown of legal. Is that something that you could provide?
Mayor, members of council, you see legal fees every month when you look at the check registry. The budget line is just the forecast for the overall anticipated legal fees for a given year. We don't know exactly what will transpire during the course of the year, so it's a prediction for what the legal fees are. We have special legal counsel for unique circumstances of $60,000, and I believe $125,000 for our general municipal attorney, Mr. Fitzgibbons. Once again, on a monthly basis, you look at the check registry, you can see the respective legal fees that are paid. It says legal next to it and the respective fee that was paid. So it's pretty transparent. Don't know if Cave Creek or many other communities that have their check registry on a monthly basis that goes in front of the town council.
Okay. Next up, Ms. Sharon Smith.
Sharon Smith, Carefree resident. I was delighted and honored to be a part of that comparability study, the compensation study, both in selecting the consultant and reviewing his findings. It was extraordinarily well done. Now, let me give you a little background on my own qualifications, why I say that with some authority. I've been doing those studies for over 50 years, beginning with a comprehensive study of the federal government, followed by a study of all levels of government. The monograph I wrote became the best-selling monograph in the 100-year history of the Industrial Relations section at Princeton. It was read into the congressional record. I subsequently oversaw a similar study for AT&T when it had to try to set competitive wages for the first time as a newly competitive company nationally. When we look at wages and benefits, we look at it for a labor market. If I were the head of Mayo hiring a thoracic heart surgeon for their facility in Scottsdale, I would be entering a national market. Our staff are not generally part of a national market. They are part of a regional market where you worry about what their talents command in the market and what price they are willing to pay, willing to accept. So we want to try to match demand and supply prices. That's what this study is all about. If we want to pay what is generally paid for similar talents in Northwest Arizona, we will have probably no staff, and we could be known as the town that exploits its staff. I don't think that's an image that Carefree wants. We have an extraordinarily talented staff, but they live in a high-price market. And if we want to recognize their skills and abilities, we pay what the market demands. And that's what this is all about. But at the end of the day, the study concluded that we were not overpaying our staff, and in fact, some of them were underpaid. So it was a very serious, well-done study that should inform the way we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have no additional slips, so that closes the public comment. Any other, before we wrap this up, comments or questions from the council?
One, oh, go ahead.
Just a comment. I think that this budget is something to be very proud of. I'm happy that we have a surplus. From my point of view, for the town core and the beauty of the town, I have eyes on how some of that extra money is going to be spent. So, thank you.
Okay,
Just on your salaries, yes, you gave the salaries, but you gave none of the benefits. So you just have the base salaries. The other towns break it down by salary and all the benefits and all the, what we're paying in for, medical, eyes, ears, throat, whatever. But you just gave the base, you didn't give anything, or the payment for the pensions.
Those numbers are included, but they are included per department, but they did list those.
They didn't break them out. Per employee, it is not broken out, or tell me what page it's on.
yeah.
Not broken out.
Yeah, it's only broken out for those situations where there's one person in the unit. For those where there's more than one, they are not broken out.
And what is that, you can go sit down with Gary and get that information, but that's pretty standard. That's pretty standard, and really out of our control in the sense that the cost of health insurance is the cost of health insurance with which I think we have a very good pool that we belong to for small local governments. So,
But it's a cost.
so what is, and you're against paying for that?
I look like you could pay, but they do break it out, and they give you all the base salary plus all the benefits, so you have the total cost per employee.
Okay, fair enough.
It's
Okay.
fair.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, anyway, I think the budget is just a great document. And it takes a lot of effort to put it together. And for anyone who reads it, it's an education. That's my opinion. And you learn how the town works, how the government works. And if you think there's things that are within this document which make it confusing, then just let us know, and then we can address those things. So anyway, having said that, hearing no other comments, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.